Tonight, startling new numbers from the CDC, a report showing hundreds of children testing positive for COVID after attending a Georgia summer camp. Of the nearly 600 people present, 344 were tested for COVID, with 260 testing positive, the vast majority children.
Things are going to be a little bit different.
In a video posted to YouTube in early June, counselors demonstrated safety steps as they prepared to welcome campers. That video was posted June 11th. Less than 3 weeks later, the camp was shut down. The report says regular singing and cheering likely contributed to transmission. And while the camp did meet Georgia's requirements to reopen, the report notes the camp failed to implement 2 CDC guidelines, opening windows and doors for increased ventilation in buildings and mandating face coverings for everyone.
At least 8 Marines are missing off the coast of Southern California. Search and rescue efforts are underway right now.
And Tom, a number of military families have been waiting up all night, waiting for word on their loved ones. Search and rescue operations are going on right now off the coast of Southern California after a Marine amphibious assault vehicle took on water during an exercise overnight. 15 Marines and 1 sailor were inside the AAV at the time of the incident. 8 have been recovered. 2 Marines have been transported to hospitals. 1 is in critical condition. The other is stable. We've also confirmed that 1 Marine was killed. The Marines are part of the 15th Expeditionary Unit, a unit that can be sent quickly to respond to emergencies across the world at any point. The amphibious assault vehicle they were training in can be launched from a Navy ship and then used like a regular armored personnel carrier when it hits the beach.
A massive wildfire forced thousands of people to evacuate their residences as firefighters tried to douse the ravaging fire that spread across 12,000 acres in Southern California. The wildfire in Southern California began on the evening of the 31st of July as the mercury levels soared beyond normal levels. The fire began shortly before 5 in the evening, charring about 1,900 acres on Friday. And in the next 48 hours, it burnt out close to about 12,000 acres of land. Now, at this point of time, more than 7,800 people have been evacuated.
It's probably time to stop calling people who believe in UFOs crackpots after the recent revelation that there's actually a Pentagon task force looking into them. One astrophysicist who has worked for the Pentagon's UFO program since 2007 told the New York Times that he gave a classified briefing to a Defense Department agency about retrievals from, quote, off-world vehicles not made on this Earth. Are we on the brink of full disclosure about visitors from outer space?
You're absolutely right. And a good example of this sea change is the fact that none other than Scientific American itself has published an article saying the subject ought to be taken seriously and investigated by the scientific community. I think this change is largely primarily a result of the fact that the Defense Department and the Navy themselves have stood up and publicly acknowledged that this phenomenon is real.
A heavy rain warning has been issued in most parts of South Korea, including Seoul and the provinces of Gyeonggi-do, Gangwon-do, and Chungcheong-do. The Korea Meteorological Administration warns that the Seoul metropolitan area could see 1 to 200 millimeters of rain per hour until Monday. In the city of Icheon, Gyeonggi-do province, part of the embankment of a reservoir collapsed, submerging nearby houses. Buildings were also submerged in Gwangju and Suwon. In the city of Ansong, to the south of Seoul, a man in his 50s was killed in a landslide Sunday morning. Rescuers found his buried body after a 2-hour search. And in the Chungcheong-do provinces, hundreds of people had to evacuate. A firefighter in Chungju, Chungcheongbuk-do province, went missing on his way to the scene Sunday morning, and it's believed that he may have been swept away by the rushing water.
It's becoming a Saturday night ritual in this square close to Benjamin Netanyahu's official residence. Early evening and the police man increasingly robust barricades, while the protesters renew their demand that Netanyahu leave office. The so-called Black Flag movement has long insisted that a prime minister on trial for alleged corruption must step down. They say the pandemic has brought new supporters to their cause. In recent weeks, protesters have risked water cannon and arrest, as well as threats of and actual physical assault by right-wing groups. The Prime Minister has labelled them anarchists, complained himself of death threats, and criticised the media for focusing on the demonstrations. Nonetheless, the numbers on the streets have only risen. Saturday's protest in West Jerusalem thought to be the biggest yet.
Welcome back. There's growing concern over rising incidents of school violence. The crime stats revealed this week show that 19 pupils were killed at school. The Education Department has also recorded 101 cases of pupils on pupil assault.
Society in South Africa is known to be violent, and we've had a long history of violence with very little intervention to try and turn that tide around. And that is where the school issue comes in. Schools are microcosms of society, so what happens out there will obviously spill over into schools. However, schools lack early intervention measures, such as school counsellors, guidance counsellors, etc., where we could address the problem before it happens.
Stage 4 is here, our COVID hell far from over. Victoria is this very minute entering a state of disaster, and all of Melbourne will be under a strict curfew from 8 o'clock tonight as the way we shop and exercise is limited even further. It comes after another day of disastrous numbers, 671 cases, 7 deaths and an exploding number of mystery infections, leaving the Premier with no choice but to pull the trigger.
The lawyer for the prime suspect in the Madeline McCann abduction says his client will never cooperate with police, but denies it's because he has something to hide. In an exclusive interview with 9 News, Friedrich Fulscher also slammed a recent search for evidence in the case, claiming it was staged by investigators.
He's the small city lawyer with an enormous challenge, defending a convicted pedophile as police work to charge him over the world's most famous child abduction.
Every person has a right to be defended by a lawyer in our system. He is innocent until proven guilty.
Friedrich Fulscher was hired by Christian Brueckner 2 months ago when he was named as the prime suspect in the Madeline McCann investigation. The pair both live in the city of Kiel in northern Germany, Brueckner behind the walls of the local prison, where he's serving time for unrelated offences.
We are free people, chants this crowd. During the coronavirus pandemic, they say wearing a mask and adhering to restrictions is violating that freedom. And it seems thousands agree. A mixture of conspiracy theorists, far-right figures and citizens concerned by the economic effects of the lockdown took to the streets of Berlin to say the coronavirus has been a false alarm. Hardly any of the demonstrators were wearing face masks or adhering to social distancing protocols. Berlin police attempted to enforce distancing measures over megaphones, eventually dissolving the protests and telling people to go home. German politicians mostly condemned the demonstration, saying that it risks harming Germany's relative success at handling the outbreak.
Anger on the streets of Mutro in Myanmar's northeast. Protesters march for justice after a 38-year-old mother from the ethnic Karen community was shot dead by soldiers. The men then stole her jewelry. Members of the community accuse the military of rights abuses and want them out. Karen community leaders say the army is using coronavirus lockdown measures as an excuse to attack villagers. Karen rebels were among the last ethnic armed groups to sign a ceasefire deal with Myanmar's government in 2012, after more than 6 decades fighting for self-rule. Many Karen villagers were forced from their land during their rebellion, and many remain living in camps along the border with Thailand.